We are in crisis.
What are they doing?
The distance between what is said...
Shut it down!
...and what is known to be true has become an abyss.
Can you say that again? Just the way you said it.
The distance between what is said...
Shut it down!
...and what is known to be true has become an abyss. Of all the things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous.
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
Correct. Thank you.
When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands, we become vulnerable to the appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest.
I don't care if you have to cut power to the whole chamber. Get her off the air!
This chamber's hold on the truth was finally lost on the Gorman Plaza. What took place yesterday, what happened yesterday on Gorman was unprovoked genocide.
Of course! Of course! Of course!
Does the word duh mean anything to you?
Yes, genocide. And that truth has been exiled from this chamber. And the monster screaming the loudest, the monster he helped create, the monster who will come for us all soon enough, is Emperor Palpatine.
Now, everything I wrote in my headings is self-evident and as obvious as the nose on your face.
I agree with that.
But in a world like ours, where the distance between what is said and what is known to be true has become an abyss, these obvious truths appear to be, at best, controversial and at worst, anti-Semitic conspiracy theory to the average brainwashed, propagandized, psyoped normie.
That's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say that.
So, for any normies watching who can't already see that Mon Mothma's brilliant speech from the equally brilliant Andor, possibly the greatest TV show ever, and definitely the greatest Star Wars show ever,
I agree with that.
Applies just as well to the powers that be in our world as it does to the Galactic Empire.
What did you say, nigga?
Here are 5 real-world examples of the distance between what is said, i.e. the official narrative, and what is known to be true, i.e. the facts, having become an abyss.
I immediately don't like you.
1. The 9/11 conspiracy. 2. The quote-unquote man-made climate change and chemtrails conspiracy. 3. The Wuhan leak conspiracy. 4. The quote-unquote cure is worse than a disease global lockdown policy conspiracy.
You shut your goddamn mouth!
And 5. The COVID vaccines are quote-unquote safe and effective conspiracy.
You need to shut the fuck up!
The difference between the official narrative and the facts about all 5 of these events is as wide and deep as an abyss.
I really don't like you. Seriously.
As the rest of this video will demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt. But before I do that, I need to address what is currently the largest and most genocidal abyss between the official narrative and the facts, which is the fact that October the 7th was a false flag operation conducted by Benjamin Netanyahu's government in order to provide a pretext for the genocide in Gaza, which is currently ongoing almost 3 years later.
Really?
As you will discover when we examine 9/11, the House of Rothschild the Sauron puppet masters of Netanyahu's Sauroman sock puppet, love themselves a problem, reaction, solution when it comes to justifying a genocidal war, like, say, World War I.
That's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say that.
And true to form, October the 7th has all the hallmarks of a Rothschild false flag.
Fuck.
Was October 7th a false flag attack? The conclusion I've come to is that if it wasn't a false flag attack, then man, they sure went out of their way to do a lot of really weird and sketchy shit to make it seem exactly like a false flag attack. Just everything about it, just from the absolutely staggering amount of warning that the Israeli government had that this attack was coming from a billion different directions that they all just completely ignored. And then there's the response to the attack, which was just catastrophically slow, ineffective, and counterproductive, not to mention the now infamous Hannibal Directive, which we will get into, where some unspecified number of Israelis were killed by friendly fire. And furthermore, there was the deliberate bullshit propaganda campaign after the attack that was pushed by Israeli and American government officials and media that has since been completely debunked. Propaganda that is especially troubling considering that this attack was used for the immediate and overwhelming retaliation that turned Gaza into a parking lot, thereby massively accelerating the Greater Israel Project, which was overwhelmingly to the benefit of the Netanyahu administration.
So now that you know that the genocide in Gaza, that you're an anti-Semite for calling a genocide, is not some righteously justified retaliation against the inherently evil baby-beheading Palestinians, as the Zionist-owned media's official narrative has been shoving down your dirty, goy throat for the past 3 years, but is in fact a ruthlessly planned, mercilessly executed, utterly psychopathic mass human sacrifice to the Zionist god Baal, aka Satan.
Oh, I see.
Now that you know what we're dealing with, let's take a fresh look at the facts around 9/11.
Within 45 seconds of the second hit at the World Trade Center, Fox News anchor solved 9/11.
There was a pilot who flew. There was another one. We just saw another one. We just saw another one apparently go. Another plane just flew into the second tower. This has to be deliberate, folks.
Well, that would begin to say that, yeah.
We just saw on live television as a second plane flew into the second tower of the World Trade Center. Now, given what has been going on around the world, some of the key suspects come to mind: Osama bin Laden.
And then we just heard OBL.
Osama bin Laden.
What's a bin Laden?
Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden.
The government has never even tried to prove it's a OBL story. It's a fiction.
He is always poised to strike again. Immensely wealthy man and a very private man. He has been granted a safe haven by Afghanistan's ruling Taliban movement. And during his time in hiding, he has called for a holy war against the United States.
The buildings turned to dust before they even reached the ground. You can actually see this happening. You can watch any of the videos from the news channels. They all show the same thing.
We thought we knew what we saw. A plane hitting the building should not turn the buildings into dust.
We've got to start looking at this whole situation a lot differently than we have up until now.
We're talking here about 43,600 windows, 600,000 square feet of glass, 200,000 tons of structural steel, 5 million square feet of gypsum, 6 acres of marble, and 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, turned in good part into a cloud.
The 110-story tower disintegrated in just 10 seconds.
That's not a collapse. And it's not an explosion. It's a building frothing up into powder. Collapses don't do that.
The seismic recordings would have reflected 2 500,000-ton buildings slamming to the ground, but they did not. Didn't happen.
There's a cluster of core columns that remains here. Watch what happens to them. They just faint.
Here's Building 7, which is a 47-story building. It's like 650 feet tall, approximately. This has got to be over that.
It physically disintegrates in front of your eyes. Not concrete, but steel.
You can see all of this is frothing up into dust. And it's also blowing downward.
That's about 700 feet tall. If that thing tipped over, it would take out a few blocks worth of buildings. How's it going to go straight down? You got a 700-foot hole in the ground, dropping into?
So as we talk about Israel and their very obvious involvement in 9/11, I find it helpful to consider a very brief analogy. Consider for a moment that there was a car crash. A brutal car crash, one in which a young woman passed away. Very tragic. At first it seems like an accident, but as the police investigate the crash, they begin to suspect foul play, and in particular that the husband of the young woman was involved. You see, it turns out that the brake lines of the car were cut. It also turns out that the husband took out a massive life insurance policy just a few weeks before the crash, and that the husband usually carpooled with his wife to work every single morning, but deviated from this routine specifically on the day of the crash, allegedly to attend a doctor's appointment. And also, it turns out that the husband was caught on camera at the scene of the crash, celebrating and dancing and giving out high fives. Now, even though there is only circumstantial evidence that connects this husband to the crash, the amount of that circumstantial evidence is absolutely overwhelming. More than enough that any reasonable jury would absolutely find him guilty. And similarly, when we look at the 9/11 attacks, we can see a very clear pattern of certain individuals having foreknowledge of the attacks. And because they had that foreknowledge, they were able to put themselves into a position to receive benefit and avoid harm. One of the best examples of this would be Lucky Larry Silverfish. Lucky Larry is a Jewish gazillionaire real estate tycoon who happened to be close personal friends with not one but two Israeli prime ministers at the time of the attack, Ariel Sharon and Bibi Bitchboy Netanyahu. In other words, this is a man who is deep in the upper echelons of the billionaire kitty diddling Epstein client list. One might even say, balls deep.
Hey, phrasing!
7 weeks prior to 9/11, Lucky Larry secured ownership of the Twin Towers, which under normal circumstances would have been a dubious investment because they were both full of asbestos insulation and would have required hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to renovate. a cost which would have rivaled the actual value of the buildings, which is probably why he was able to secure the lease for these properties with only $14 million in upfront equity. Now, Mr. Silverfish here had a very particular habit of eating breakfast every single morning at 8 a.m. in the Windows on the World restaurant in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Every morning except for the morning of September the 11th. In a very fortunate turn of fate, he just happened to miss work that day for a doctor's appointment that his wife had set up.
My wife, God bless her, had made an appointment for me at the doctor. And I remember dressing to go to the doctor. I'm finally saying to my wife, I said, sweetheart, I've got so much to do downtown. I got to cancel this. I've got to go downtown. And she said, you're not going to cancel this appointment. You're going to the dermatologist. You know, having been married now to the same woman for 46 years, you get this sense of determination on occasion, their voices. And I said, okay, yes, dear, I'll go.
Why are you laughing, Larry, you sick son of a bitch? His two children, who also worked with him in the North Tower, also just happened to miss work that morning and also survived.
Coincidence? I think not!
Which is great because it just so happens that Lucky Larry had put a very, very generous insurance policy on the buildings, which specifically covered against terrorist attacks. And after a years-long legal process, he managed to profit $4.5 billion for himself and his two Nepo babies. So in other words, not only did this guy inexplicably survive the attacks along with his two children, who all should have been there that morning, but as a result of the attacks, he managed to secure a $4.5 billion payout on a $14 million dodgy, ill-advised real estate investment, which, by the way, is a 32,000% return on a 7-week investment. Now, if that's not insider trading, then the word has literally no meaning whatsoever. But it gets better, because the two people that helped him to set up this massive insurance scam payout also happened to be massive neocon Zionist Jewish individuals. I'm talking, of course, about Louis Eisenberg, a former Goldman Sachs partner who happened to be the New York Port Authority chairman in 2001, who negotiated the World Trade Center lease transfer to Lucky Larry and oversaw the post-attack cleanup operation where 50,000 tons of crime scene evidence were shipped to China for scrap before they could be thoroughly examined. And our good buddy Michael McCaskey, who was the judge who oversaw the insurance litigation after the attacks and pushed through the massive $4.5 billion payday. But it gets even better, because as it turns out, Lucky Larry also built World Trade Center 7 in the late 80s. Yes, the very same World Trade Center 7 that is the only steel-framed skyscraper in history to collapse due to fire, and also that collapsed in on itself at free-fall speeds in a manner eerily similar to a controlled demolition shortly after Larry gave the order to pull it.
I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
And the same World Trade Center 7 that happened to be occupied by a gaggle of government agencies to include the CIA, the IRS, the SEC, the DOD, the Secret Service, and the New York Office of Emergency Management. Oh, and also the Solomon Brothers, because, sure, why not? Just throw them in there too. Nothing weird about any of that at all. But Lucky Larry wasn't the only Epstein-connected Jewish gazillionaire scumbag to survive the attacks and make a butt-ton of money over it. See, there was also Mr. Harry Nutlick. That's right, the very same Harry Nutlick who is the current Secretary of Commerce, and the very same Harry Nutlick who was Epstein's next-door neighbor and who infamously lied about his relationship to Epstein and who took his children to Epstein Island and sent that really, really, really creepy email where he listed out his children's ages to Epstein, and who even had a mask of his face hanging on a wall on Epstein Island. Yeah, that fucking guy. Well, back in 2001, Mr. Nutlick just happened to be the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, a financial services firm headquartered in the World Trade Center. Over 650 employees of Cantor Fitzgerald died that day, making it the highest loss of life of any single organization on 9/11. But not Mr. Nutlick. Oh no, he allegedly missed work that day due to taking his son to the first day of kindergarten, even though the first day of kindergarten at Horace Mann in 2001 was apparently 5 days earlier on September 6th. But hey, whatever, it's fine. What are you, an anti-Semite? Mr. Nutlick also went on to give a series of weird, creepy, duping delight interviews immediately after the attacks, where he bragged about getting double the insurance payouts on his 650 dead employees.
They told our guys, they didn't tell me, and then they told me that that they were willing to treat this as an accidental death. Which means that they would double the policy for all of my victims upstairs and all of us, and so that added $35 million.
Only to then cut off payroll for the widows of said employees within weeks of the attack. He did finally pay them the money that they were owed, but only after the public backlash was terrible enough. And he did it through a non-profit, so I'm sure that there wasn't any, weird money laundering going on there. Oh, and he also dropped this little doozy of a Freudian slip in one of those interviews he gave.
Today, the remaining employees of Cantor Fitzgerald and Eastbeat have worked every second since that bomb, and they made the decision every second since that bomb, every second since that bomb, since that bomb.
What a weird thing to say, Mr. Nutlick. And a lot of people will push back on Lutnick having had any prior knowledge about the attacks because his brother died in one of the towers. But guys, this is a man who took his own children to Epstein Island and described their ages to Epstein in an email that reads like a Sears catalog. Okay? I sincerely doubt that such a man would hesitate to sacrifice his own brother for a nickel. But, allegedly. Whatever. Number 3, the dancing Israelis. Starting at around 9 a.m. on September the 11th, 5 Israeli nationals working for a fake Mossad-linked company called Urban Moving Systems were seen in multiple locations by multiple witnesses taking photos and videos of the towers as they burned. They were also seen celebrating, dancing, taking selfies, and giving each other high fives, which is a pretty fucking weird thing to do.
And I could see that they were like happy. They didn't look shocked to me. They didn't look shocked. I thought it was very strange.
Weird enough that they were arrested by the New York Police Department and then held and interrogated by the FBI for 10 weeks. Given a lack of direct evidence of their involvement in the attack, they were eventually extradited back to Israel, where they then proceeded to give a live Israeli television interview where they brazenly admitted to having foreknowledge of the attack.
The fact of the matter is, we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event. Our purpose was to document the event. Our purpose was to document the event.
Number 4, Benjamin Bitchboy Netanyahu. On the afternoon of September the 11th, after the towers had fallen, Bibi Bitchboy held a press conference in which he was barely able to contain his glee. When asked what the attack meant for relations between the United States and Israel, he replied, quote, "It's very good. It's not very good, but it will generate immediate sympathy, and that it would, quote, strengthen the bond between Israel and America." When asked to elaborate, he explained that the attacks would, quote, make Americans much more willing to die in an endless series of military quagmires against Israel's rivals in order to destabilize the Middle East and fulfill the 1996 clean break policy. Okay, I might have editorialized that last bit, but, that is basically what he was saying there, which is a point that he would reiterate in 2008 when he said, quote, "Israel is benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and Pentagon and the American struggle in Iraq." He then went on to say, "Can you believe that these stupid fucking Goyim actually bought that bullshit about WMDs? Now I just need to get a kitty diddler with Epstein footage in the White House and we can get them to invade Iran too. Ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha." And it just kind of repeats after that. You get the idea. Anyway, number 5, the Odigo Messaging Company. Odigo was an Israeli instant messaging company with offices in New York City and Israel. 2 employees of Odigo received explicit warning about the attack several hours before it happened. FBI investigated the incident, but nothing ever came of it, which is a little weird because I didn't think that Kash Patel was running the FBI back then. You sold us out to the pedos, didn't you, Kash? You fucking coward. Number 6, Zim Integrated Shipping Services. Zim is an international freight shipping company which in 2001 was 49% owned and operated by the Israeli government. They were also headquartered in the North Tower of the World Trade Center, but fortunately, just a few weeks before the attack, they broke their lease and moved their offices to Virginia. About 90% of the employees had already relocated to Virginia, and the remaining 10% that were still in the tower managed to make it out because they were on a very low floor. Guys, can you imagine being a part of the 10% of the employees that didn't get a heads up? Like, talk about a hostile work environment.
The distance between what is said, shut it down, and what is known to be true has become an abyss. Of all the things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous.
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
Correct. Thank you.
When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands, we become vulnerable to the appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest. And the monster screaming the loudest, the monster he helped create, the monster who will come for us all soon enough, is Emperor Palpatine.
I told you so.
The might and power of the abyssal deep dictate the endless mood swings of the entire planet. The air and its precocious shifting winds are almost entirely dominated by the depth, scale, and complexity of the oceans. This is where the true rhythm of global climate comes from, not through the thin gaseous envelope of the atmosphere, which retains little warmth itself and contains roughly only 1 to 2% of the world's carbon reservoir. It's an ephemeral, fast-acting envelope, but the oceans are the planetary flywheel. They absorb vast amounts of energy with only incremental changes in temperature, because water possesses a specific heat capacity 4 times greater than air. Ocean currents have carried warmth from the tropics to the cold northern regions in cycles lasting 1,000 years. Waters that sank in the 12th century are only now returning to the surface via the Great Global Conveyor Belt. Around 93% of Earth's accumulated heat energy is held within the oceans, leaving a mere fraction distributed across the atmosphere, land, and ice sheets combined. They absorb surface anomalies and release them over centuries or millennia. Water upwelling near the equator or in polar regions today began its descent into the abyssal depths long before modern industrial measurements existed. Because heat penetrates the ocean slowly through turbulent mixing and deep thermohaline overturning, surface atmospheric changes do not register immediately throughout the entire water column. This dynamic creates a profound temporal smoothing effect. This is the slower, more measured pace of planetary mood swings. While Henry's law governs the surface exchanges of gases, where cold water absorbs atmospheric CO2 and warm water releases it, the ocean's carbon storage capacity is doubly reinforced by the biological carbon pump. Cold, dense surface water dissolves atmospheric carbon and sinks into the deep ocean basins, driven by ocean circulation and polar cooling. This endless muscle memory effectively sequesters gas from the active atmosphere for centuries. The invisible powers of the micro world are astonishing. Photosynthetic phytoplankton in the sunlit photic zone capture carbon to build organic tissue and calcium carbonate shells. When these organisms die, a continuous shower of organic material, marine snow, descends like flower petals into the dark abyssal zone. This biology transfers organic carbon out of contact with the atmosphere, locking it into ocean sediments on geological timescales. The oceans serve as the true regulator of the terrestrial environment through this combination of high heat capacity, slow overturning cycles, and deep biological sequestration. They are the invisible heartbeat of our solitary blue-green planetary home.
Meaning?
We are supposed to believe that carbon dioxide, CO2, is the cause of warming the planet. The fact that the planet has warmed and cooled throughout its history and has been a hell of a lot warmer than it is now, that's irrelevant. You've got to shut up about that. You've just got to believe the very simple fact. Carbon dioxide warms the planet and threatens all life. It's bollocks, but believe it, repeat it, and don't question it. Well, here's another way of looking at that. When you see the relationship between rising carbon dioxide through the history of the planet and temperature, they don't correlate. Temperature leads the rising carbon dioxide, not the other way round. How can that be, Dave? I'll tell you. Because the biggest reservoir of carbon dioxide on the planet is in the oceans. And when the oceans warm, they release carbon dioxide. That's why temperature leads carbon dioxide, not the other way round. And the lag time between the warming and the carbon dioxide being unleashed is about 800 years. They don't tell me that on the BBC. Isn't that strange? What about David Attenborough? Have you ever mentioned that? Of course, it's ridiculous. But all these lazy and lying people in the media just repeat, here we go again, what they're told to believe.
For me then, what I said at that time, and I still agree with, the global warming has become a new religion because you can't discuss it. And that's not right. Then we have what we call fraudulent science. Some people cheat in science on purpose. And so the question then, what I'm going to ask, is global warming a pseudoscience? Why does it matter if the temperature is going up 0.8 degrees, the average temperature, if indeed you could measure it? So from 1880 to 2013, the temperature has increased then from 288 degree Kelvin to 288.8 degree Kelvin. It's 0.3%. It's very little. And if it's true, it means to me the temperature has been amazingly stable. CO2 has very little to do with the temperature change. Water vapor is a much, much, much stronger green gas than the CO2. If you look out of the window, you see the sky, you see the clouds, and you don't see the CO2. As you heard, I resigned from the American Physical Society because this statement, energy is incontrovertible. American Physical Society discussed the mass of the proton. The mass of the proton is not incontrovertible, according to the American Physical Society. But the global warming is. See, that's a religion. The Earth was much better than it was 150 years ago. So why is it suddenly changing? Why is it suddenly getting worse? But one thing you should be very careful, you should not confuse pollution with CO2. CO2 is not the pollution. We are all agreed that pollution is a bad thing and so on, but it has nothing to do with CO2. And they don't mention at all in here how important CO2 is for plant life. And so if you have more CO2, the plant grows better all over the earth. If you have a greenhouse and put carbon dioxide in it, the plant grows faster. Plants, CO2, of course, is food for plants. We have to talk about something else. We like to talk about climate change. And you may have noticed that when you talk about climate change, it's always to the worse. Nobody says, oh, I'm so glad the climate is changing and getting better. But nobody says that. When you say climate change, you mean it getting worse. So the climate has always changed. The weather is no more extreme now. When we had a big catastrophe in the United States, when New Orleans was almost wiped out of the map, we had 8 hurricanes that year. The papers say this is the future. This is global warming. This is what we have to expect. The next year, there was no hurricane in the United States. Nobody wrote in the paper say, there are no hurricane, this must do to global warming, this we can expect, Only when disasters happen, you get into the act and say this is bad. The ocean level increasing. There is no unusual size in the sea level.
Did you tell the folks that? You bitch.
Almost 80% of UK Met Office stations have error margins of up to 2 degrees Celsius, with many as bad as 5 degrees. Yet the same agency claims new records down to 1/100th of a degree. Of the UK's 380 stations, only 14% meet World Meteorological Organization standards. The rest sit beside roads, buildings or runways, places like Heathrow and St James's Park. According to the WMO, almost half of UK stations are rated Class 4, unreliable, with a third rated Class 5, effectively junk. These distorted readings feed climate emergency headlines and net zero policies. Meanwhile, satellite and high-grade US datasets show only slight warming, a continuation of the post-Little Ice Age temperature rise. But those don't serve the narrative, so they're routinely ignored.
Can you say that again? Just the way you said it.
Meanwhile, satellite and high-grade US datasets show only slight warming, a continuation of the post-Little Ice Age temperature rise. But those don't serve the narratives. So they're routinely ignored.
I told you so.
Yeah, but even if the temperature readings aren't accurate, it's definitely getting hotter. The summers are definitely getting hotter. That is not made up. I can feel how hot this summer has been. So there is definitely global warming going on.
Correct.
You're right. There is global warming going on. And it is man-made. Just not in the way you've been brainwashed to believe.
Oh, shit.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
So here with Kristen Megan, she's a military veteran, right?
Yes, I was in the U.S. Air Force for 9 years.
Wow. And you came out and blew the whistle on geoengineering, things that you witnessed were going on. Can you give us the real nutshell?
Absolutely. Basically, I had heard of what many people know as the term chemtrails. And I worked in a job called bioenvironmental engineering, and I thought that was insane. And why would we do something like that? Modify the weather by using hazardous materials in our atmosphere? So, and actually the process of trying to debunk it or disprove it, I realized it was actually coming right out of my office, as I was one of the people that was approving the chemicals. And it really shook the core of my oath. And I did a lot of sampling, did a lot of investigation, and I blew the whistle and I got out. And I've now used my credentials, my oath, and my powers for good to help people understand it's very real. It's now openly admitted. There are multiple forms of weather modification. I specifically found the one of stratospheric aerosol injection. And collectively around the globe, we have to understand that it is now being admitted because they're saying it's combating climate change. Well, the climate change we need to be worried about is man-made climate engineering, also known as geoengineering.
And when you say you had chemicals being pumped into the air, What kind of chemicals are they putting out that rain down on humanity, basically?
Nanoparticulate metals, like you had different sulfates and barium and strontium. I know it's probably changed over time. I know they use silver iodide for certain things, but these are the odd part of it was the quantities that I saw them coming in, the form that they were coming in, and it's the same type of materials that I was trying to engineer out of the workplace to substitute with safer materials. And when you notice that what's called the safety data sheet, the information about a chemical of what personal protective equipment to wear, how do you dispose of it, how do you pack it to ship it, when key information is missing, I ask questions. And my questions led to demonization, and I knew I found something I shouldn't have.
That's insane. So these metals are basically toxic for the humans, I would presume, or?
Yes, because it also has aluminum, and a lot of people will tell you, well, these things aren't horrible in small quantities. It's not small quantities, because when you are putting things above us, the dissipation rates are dependent on weather and climate, but it's getting into the food, it's getting into the soil. And around the world, these wastewater treatment plants, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, or these toxicants is what they're called, they are not able to filter them out. So if you're growing organic food, are we going to go back to the plexiglass barriers on our plants? I mean, it's horrible. That's why you can ban it anywhere. We've had states in the United States ban it, and that is great to get the ball rolling. But people really need to wake up to it, irrespective of any political party. It's not okay. And you're seeing a huge increase in neurodegenerative issues like Alzheimer's. It's really difficult for people with respiratory issues and asthma. And people are wondering why they have allergies 24/7, 365.
And I liked what you said about that climate change, or the change we experience in weather. Often we can't disconnect that from these geoengineering activities. Do you want to say something more about that? I mean, how do we feel that? Is there proof or so that is definitely coming from that?
Yes, there are places that openly admitted it. Remember Dubai? And then when people got upset, they retracted it, but the can was already opened. And the issue is, I know this sounds silly, but when you watch movies with time change, they say if you do something and something changes, it changes the ripple throughout time. If you are modifying the weather, you are messing with Mother Nature. And meteorology is a very, very thorough study. And I do know a lot of it because of my profession of plotting hazards. But it does not make sense when you are altering nature where things are not naturally supposed to occur. We had massive flooding in California, and we have a system called HARP that is in the United States. And the same people who demonized me 5-10 years ago are now going, wow, because they're finding it's openly admitted in all of our U.S. documents. The U.S. is absolutely not the only country doing it.
The distance between what is said,
Shut it down,
and what is known to be true has become an abyss of all the things at risk. The loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous. The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
Man, there you go with that bullshit.
I mean, the whole concept I challenged from day one. I said, right from the beginning, this virus escaped from the laboratory. It has 6 inserts that could only have been put in manually. My peers said, well, this can occur randomly. I said, no, once, but not 6 times.
Oh, shit! Oh, shit!
This has been interfered with. And the most important thing, we said that the vaccine was 80% homologous to humans, so it was bound to cause major side effects.
For 2 years, myself and the other Republicans on this subcommittee connected the dots. We exposed the evidence supporting our strong belief that COVID was developed and leaked from the Wuhan lab. And during those same 2 years, the same Democrats that sit on this committee, they only hindered, they obstructed, they refused to hold hearings and get to the truth. Now we see mounting evidence supporting the COVID-19 originated from the lab in Wuhan, China, run by the Communist Chinese Party. And this hearing is about getting to the truth. I thank the chairman for making this the very first hearing, because the American people who have seen just as many fellow Americans die from COVID, as nearly as many die from COVID, that died in every war since the American Revolution combined, deserve to know the truth. Dr. Redfield, you pointed to the lab leak theory even before we did. In mid-January of 2020, you expressed concerns to Dr. Fauci, to Jeremy Farrar of UK's Wellcome Trust, and to Dr. Tedros of World Health Organization that, quote, we had to take the lab leak hypothesis with extreme seriousness. And you urged Dr. Fauci to investigate both the lab and the natural hypotheses. Shortly thereafter, on February 1st, Farrar convened a meeting of a group of 11 top scientists across 5 time zones and asked Dr. Fauci to join, and he wrote, quote, my preference is to keep this group really tight. Obviously, ask everyone to treat in total confidence, unquote. Dr. Redfield, you were excluded from this call, but up until then, you had been on you were included in every other conversation. What changed? Why do you think that you were excluded from these conversations?
Thank you very much. I think just to emphasize, in early to mid-January, I did have multiple calls with Fauci, Farrar, and Tedros about how important I thought it was that science get engaged in aggressively pursuing both hypotheses. I also expressed, as a clinical virologist, that I felt it was not scientifically plausible that this virus went from a bat to humans and became one of the most infectious viruses that we have with humans. All viruses are not the same. So when you look at coronaviruses, for SARS and MERS, for example, when they entered the human species, which they did via an intermediate, they never learned how to go human to human. Even to this day, they don't know how to go human to human. So you can't equate Ebola with a coronavirus.
Now, why do you think you were excluded from those calls?
Because it was told to me that they wanted a single narrative and that I obviously had a different point of view.
Okay. In emails following the conference call, 4 of the 11 scientists told Fauci that they all found the genetic sequence inconsistent with expectations from evolutionary theory, basically what you're saying. However, just 3 days later, these 4 scientists had drafted a paper arguing the exact opposite, and that's now the infamous proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2. Our investigations show that this paper was prompted by Dr. Fauci, among others, with a goal to disprove the lab leak theory. What is the likelihood that these scientists came across additional information just 3 days after making these statements to conclude with such certainty that COVID-19 came from nature instead of the lab leak that they thought it was 3 days earlier?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. Again, I've said this before, that this whole approach that was taken on February 1st, and subsequently in the month of February, if you really want to be truthful, it's antithetical to science.
Thank you.
Science has debate, and they squashed any debate.
Thank you. Given what we know now and looking at all the conversations in February of 2020 and before the release of the paper, do you think that Dr. Fauci used this paper to hide the gain-of-function research created this virus?
I can't talk about Fauci's motivation.
Do you think that the paper does hide the truth?
I think it's an inaccurate paper that basically was part of a narrative that they were creating. Remember, this pandemic did not start in January at the seafood market. We now know there was infections all the way back into September. This was a narrative that was decided that they were going to say this came from the wet market, and they were going to do everything they could to support it, to negate any discussion about the possibility that this came from a laboratory.
I got 20 seconds left. Dr. Fauci was affirmatively told in an email that NIAID had a monetary relationship with the Wuhan Institute through EcoHealth Alliance. He was told this in January 27th of 2020. Do you think that Dr. Fauci intentionally lied under oath to Senator Paul when he vehemently denied NIH's funding of gain-of-function research?
I think there's no doubt that NIH was funding gain-of-function research.
Is it likely that American tax dollars funded the gain-of-function research that created this virus?
I think it did, not only from NIH, but from the State Department, USAID, and from DOD.
The distance between what is said, shut it down, and what is known to be true has become an abyss of all the things at risk. The loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous.
The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
I don't remember talking about masks at all.
What did you say? What the did you just say?
But the two of you personally were using masks.
Yeah.
I remember you seemed like a really extreme case because you would wear the full thing when you'd leave your apartment, and it was like, is he gone overboard? Is he germphobic?
I was doing, yeah.
Flashback. Hope we've learned in the last year?
Yeah, I just don't think of wearing a mask as such a deep inconvenience. I mean, we ask people to wear pants. Why was this politicized? Early stage of the infection, we thought this was about coughing. We didn't know the simple masks would provide so much benefit. You get the message about masks to be a kind of bipartisan, let's protect other people type message. And
you lying ass bitch.
So without further ado, let's cut to the chase and take a look at an ordinary surgical mask, and I'm using a vape. As you can see, that vape, which has aerosols the same size as COVID-19 or larger, goes through and around a surgical mask. Now, if we take a cup mask and have a good look at it, here we go. Notice it goes right through the mask easily and goes in every direction. The aerosol is not affected by the mask in any material. Now we look at a surgical mask with a foam strip to protect above and keep my glasses from fogging. Lo and behold, the aerosols go all around it. Has no effect on me spreading aerosols to you. Now a cloth mask I borrowed from my wife. Once again, here we go. Boom, straight through and around. It has no effect on the spread of aerosols. They go everywhere. And then I went and bought a guard mask with a high efficiency filter material. That one, here we go. Watch for it. Through and around. It had no effect on the vape aerosol, which remember is the same size or larger. Now, I don't have an N95 mask. I have these shop respirators where they can put all kinds of things in them, but they're like an N95 because when you breathe out, everything goes out through a valve. Guess what? It might protect me from you. It sure isn't going to protect you from me. Let's look at that again. Boom. Any mask with a button on it has a valve that lets everything go from you to your neighbor. It has no effect on anything. I think you can get the picture now. There is absolutely nothing that any of these masks do to protect you from me. And the fact is that unless I have a mask which is fully sealed and where I breathe through the filter material both directions, and I have a really high quality filter, nothing is going to protect in either direction. Because just the same way that the vape went out, around, and through, it will come in, around, and through. Aerosols will not be stopped by masks.
Now, I think for most of us, common sense told us that masks don't work, yet we were forced to wear them to go into supermarkets and what have you. So a lot of us wore them when we had to and didn't wear them otherwise. However, that common sense seemed to abandon everyone when it came to lockdowns themselves. Because right at the beginning of the pandemic, I already knew what it was because I'd already read the Rothschilds lockstep document from years before. So I knew that, and The Simpsons said it.
I'd like to call to order this secret conclave of America's media empires.
We're here to come up with the next phony baloney crisis to put Americans back where they belong, in dark rooms, glued to their televisions, too terrified to skip the commercials.
Well, I think...
NBC, you are here to listen and not speak. I think we should go with a good old-fashioned public health scare.
A new disease. No one's immune. It's like the summer of the shark, except instead of a shark, it's an epidemic. And instead of summer, it's all the time.
That is smoking.
Now, I hate to be the guy who derails what everybody else loves.
He loves being that guy.
But, Janice, we do have standards. This can't be a made-up disease.
We do have something we've been holding on to, but it hasn't been tested. Get over here, NBC.
Well, we certainly believe in testing, but Wow. Wow. Oh, yeah.
So, we've got our deadly disease. Now, we just have to blame it on something.
I knew they were going to use some kind of viral pandemic to move their depopulation agenda forward and their global AI control grid biosecurity state forward. So I knew as soon as COVID happened, as soon as I saw the first announcements, 2 weeks to stop the spread, and I saw young people wearing masks in the park, I knew what was happening. But even without knowing all of that, anyone with any intelligence and common sense should know that never in human history have we quarantined healthy people. You simply do not quarantine healthy people because there's no benefit in doing so.
That's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say that.
Quarantine is for sick people. So the very premise, thank you very much, God, the very premise of lockdowns was bullshit from the start. Obviously bullshit based on the simple common sense, logic and reason that quarantine is for sick people. Thank you very much, God. And what they did was they quarantined everybody, which is completely ridiculous and insane.
Agreed.
So that's the first point. The second point is, okay, what was the difference in mortality rates from COVID between the countries and states that did lock down and those that didn't? Let's look at the most famous example, Sweden. Sweden's approach. Sweden famously avoided legally binding stay-at-home orders, relying instead on voluntary social distancing, recommendations, and targeted bans. Mortality rankings. Despite early criticism and localized surges during initial waves, Sweden's cumulative excess mortality over the course of the pandemic ended up among the lowest in Europe. Thank you very much, God. Performing better than many European nations that enforce severe, prolonged lockdowns.
And there you have it.
Lockdowns were completely unnecessary because they didn't save lives. However, what they did do was ruin, damage, and end millions of lives through economic deprivation, people losing their jobs, losing their businesses, suffering from depression, alcoholism, being stuck in the house and undergoing physical and sexual abuse.
That's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say that.
So it's very clear that if the lockdowns didn't significantly reduce deaths from COVID, but we all know they massively increased the suffering of people, then it's a fact that the cure was far worse than the disease. And I haven't even spoken about what was happening in hospitals. That is just based on masks not working and lockdowns not working, but lockdowns having such a massively harmful effect on basically billions of people. Let's take a look at what was happening in the hospitals, because that's the worst of it.
Your arm, see them. There you go. Okay, well, can you tell us your name?
Yes, my name's Gail McRae.
And you were a nurse during COVID?
I was.
So which area are we going to start at? Why don't you just start telling us what you saw as a nurse? You've heard a lot of these hospital protocols.
Yes.
Killing,
well,
they call them.
I think one of the important things about my situation is that I was working in the Bay Area of California, where we had one of the most compliant populations in the country.
It's a horrible situation. It don't even discourage you, do it. You're stupid. You're stupid.
So we were compliant with not just the lockdowns and the masking, but also the COVID injections.
What the actual fuck were you thinking?
So in my community, when COVID was first announced and they locked down the hospitals and they stopped the elective surgeries, our hospital completely emptied out. And this was when I really first saw that we were being lied to, because the public was being told in the news that the hospitals were full and overwhelmed, and they weren't. I had colleagues all over the state of California who worked in units all over the hospital in the acute care setting, and not once during that first year of COVID in 2020 and the winter of 2021 were our hospitals overwhelmed. I would say there was during the winter of 2020 and 2021 when this happens every year. People come in with the flu and the hospitals fill. It happens every year. It's been doing that for the whole 12 years I've been working in the acute care setting. So it was not unusual. We were not overwhelmed, and the public was being lied to. So that really opened my eyes to the fact that there were things going on that shouldn't have been going on. And then with the rollout of the isolations, they also started the COVID protocols. And I didn't notice right away the harm of these protocols until I had to tell family members that they couldn't come to the bedside of their dying loved ones. That, to me, was a crime against humanity and a violation of my oath that I knew right away should not have been happening. We isolate people in prison. We put them in the brig when they've done something wrong to torture them. And that's what I felt like I was being forced to do when I had to tell my patients' family members when they couldn't come into the hospital to be near their dying loved ones. So that was those small kinds of violations that I was recognizing, I think really helped me accept that I needed to more critically analyze what I was being told to do and what was happening around me in the hospital.
I like this one.
So after going through those two things at the beginning of the COVID lockdowns, it really helped me to stop and think when I was being told to do things. Like the next thing was the administration of remdesivir. This was an experimental use authorization medication. It was the only drug that we were allowed to administer to patients who were hospitalized with COVID, and it was an antiviral. And I'd been taught in my undergrad, my bachelor's degree program for nursing, that you do not administer an antiviral more than 24 to 48 hours post-symptom onset for a viral infection. And so this medication was being given to patients who were hospitalized with COVID, usually not until between 10 and 12 days post-symptom onset. So I would ask my colleagues, why are we giving this medication? The administrators, my hospital, why are we doing this? And their eyes would glaze over. And I would say to them, we have evidence showing that the administration of antivirals more than 2 days post-symptom onset causes more harm than good. The risk-benefit analysis does not correlate. And in addition to that, this was an experimental use product. And I knew that each one of those doses was over $3,000. So that was another huge red flag. In addition to that, the next part of the COVID protocols that was so extremely disturbing to me was the fact that at the onset of hospitalization for COVID, there were a team of respiratory intensivists who went before Congress and showed them how effective high-dose steroids were for the treatment of patients who had COVID. And not only were we ignoring those recommendations for high-dose steroids, they were actually blocking it from our hospitals to use. So we have patients coming in who are being feared to death by the media. They're being isolated from their loved ones. They're having steroid treatments. So I'll say one more thing about these steroids, because this is really important. The COVID, whatever it was, virus, whatever COVID was, it caused more inflammation than we had ever seen in the hospital. So there's a lab value called CRP, and even with influenza and things like this, we had never seen the inflammatory marker of CRP jump so high as we did with COVID. So for the government and the CDC and these three-letter organizations to tell practitioners that they could not administer steroids, which is this is the best treatment for an inflammatory process, it was absolutely criminal. You can't withhold steroids for the most inflammatory disease process that humanity has ever seen. So we have isolation of patients, fear-mongering from the media, withholding steroids, and the administration of remdesivir. Those were the things that I went to work and had to manage, where I every day felt like I was violating my oath as a practitioner. And ultimately, it wasn't until after the rollout of the shots where I just couldn't do my job anymore.
I don't blame you.
The distance between what is said,
Shut it down,
and what is known to be true has become an abyss of all the things at risk. The loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous.
The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
So that was the next part of what I witnessed. So I, like I said earlier, worked in the Bay Area of California for an organization called Kaiser Permanente, and they have a full scope of care. Their structure is set up to where you get your primary care, your acute care, the pediatricians, all of the medications, and your vaccines, all in the same organization. So with the COVID vaccine, they were administering it at my hospital. So when in February, so they released these shots to the practitioners in January of 2021. But they didn't release it to the public until close to the end of February. So by the beginning of March, I was starting to notice that my hospital was becoming slammed. And this is unusual because we get, winter rushes. This is how the hospital works. It's dead in the summer and it's full in the winter. Like, this is the cycle. And so I started noticing in March of 21 that it was very peculiar that I was starting to get all these calls to come to work because the hospital was understaffed. And it did not stop. I was in graduate school at the time for my double nurse practitioner degree. So I would do 3 weeks at the hospital and then I'd take some time off and study for my schooling. So by June, when I went into the hospital, I was there for 3 weeks. 3 weeks from March to April, and then another 3 weeks in the middle of June to the beginning of July. And I was working nonstop. I would work doubles basically every single shift. I was getting phone calls 3 times, sometimes 4 times a day to come to work because they were so understaffed at the hospital. And then in June, my manager approached me and he said to me, Gail, this hospital has had 3 times more admissions than we have ever had since the hospital opened their doors. So that's a 300% increase in hospitalizations directly associated to the onset of these shots.
The distance between what is said,
shut it down,
and what is known to be true has become an abyss of all the things at risk. The loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous.
The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
What about vaccine injury? The ones that actually took the shots. What did you see there?
Massive. I didn't know it was possible for a human to die so horrifically and so quickly before they rolled out the mRNA injections. It was insane. I've never seen anything like that. The worst of them were the ones, they called it sepsis, but it was like instant multi-organ failure. Like within hours, patients would die of liver, lung, kidney, all at once failure, respiratory failure. It was like some of the records, the emergency crew that found them, it's like their body tried to reject everything. And some of these cases, like their family would be there 30 minutes before, and then within an hour, they're dead. And then there were patients coming in with seizures like I've never seen before. We couldn't control some of them. Days, patients would be seizing, and no medications would stop it. And eventually they kind of had to be put down. They called it encephalitis or encephalopathy. And then later on, even the coding information organization, AHIMA, admitted COVID-19 associated encephalitis. There were blood clots, strokes. The clots were insane. Never seen clots like that before. Even the interventional radiologists that were going in with, they have angiopathies and, different scopes where they can do like heart interventions and put stents in like a carotid artery if you have a stroke going to your brain. Normally it's rare to have more than one stent go in. And they were documenting, multiple locations all at once. They had heart attack cases that were like that, where they needed massive amounts of stents that they never needed before. There were people in their 20s that had been hiking that were totally healthy, had been running marathons, that suddenly needed a leg amputated because they had a massive blood clot going from their hip all the way down to their leg, and it couldn't be saved. So that happened. There were some cases of overnight spinal gangrene, which I've never seen before. And you can't amputate, the spine when it goes gangrenous. Normally they cut out tissue that's dying like that, so it prevents further infection. And they didn't know what to do. The only thing they could do was, basically replace that part of your spine with an implant. That's the best they could do. It was really intense. And I didn't question the vaccines as much as I should have. I started to about the flu shot way back in 2004. But with the pressure to get the COVID-19 shot, I started looking into what it could do. And I knew I didn't want anything to do with this experimental mRNA thing. And when I started looking into the experts that were saying, well, this is what this potential vaccine could do, this is what the research says, I was looking at the vaccine trials and what was happening to those patients, and the Guillain-Barré that was happening, and the strokes that were happening. And so I kind of knew to look for that when the vaccine came out. And the doctors were, baffled. They weren't connecting the dots. But to me, knowing what the potential causes or potential symptoms of a vaccine injury could be, we 100% had all of the things that I just described. But doctors would never tell you that. They would just say it's a stroke, it's a heart attack, it's a blood clot, and they would never connect the two.
Is there anything that would make you take a vaccination of any kind ever again?
They would have to kill me. Nothing. Nothing would make me take it.
I like this one.
You are the problem. It is the unvaccinated who are the problem. Period. End of story.
The only people that you can blame, The only people you can blame, this isn't shaming, this is the truth. Maybe they should be shamed, are the unvaccinated.
It's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks.
Anyone you came into contact with will blame you, as will the rest of us who have done the right thing by getting vaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
I think it's time to get our moral house in order, Anderson. It's the unvaccinated who are the threat.
All of us vaccinated folks are going to start wearing masks to protect the unvaccinated folks. It's called a Christian value.
You're basically punishing the vaccinated for the sins of the unvaccinated.
People are not behaving honorably. The unvaccinated are basically saying, well, it's open season for me. I can do whatever I want as well.
The unvaccinated are basically beating their breasts, running around the country saying, we don't care, we're living free, and so forth.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
Unvaccinated, a group that includes children and people acting like children. And the rest of us are starting to get pissed off.
The vaccinated feel the unvaccinated are making me upset or angry.
This is not about freedom or personal choice.
Well, my freedom is being kind of disturbed here. No, screw your freedom.
The other day, Howard Stern weighed in with a much different approach. Take a look.
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated? Their freedom.
But you're treading on our freedom and you're making other people sick, and really you're killing other people.
The anti-vaxxers, they seem to have a thing for death and home remedies.
The anti-maskers turned anti-vaxxers are not just putting their own lives at risk. If that was the issue, we could just say that we can watch them compete to win place or show in the Darwin Awards.
We have to start doing things for the greater good of society, and not for idiots who think that they can do their own research.
And don't get me started on the lunatics who won't take any of the COVID vaccines.
Life is too short to be an ass. Life is way too short to be ignorant of the promise of something that is helping people worldwide.
Maybe you're doing it because you're disconnected or disorganized. Maybe you have some sympathetic psychological reasons. But maybe you're just being antisocial.
Oh, you can't shame them. You can't call them stupid. You can't call them silly. Yes, they are.
Those who are not vaccinated will end up paying the price.
The unvaccinated should be taxed. They should pay more for health care.
We need to start looking at the choice to remain unvaccinated the same as we look at driving while intoxicated.
We're going to see, and I've said, almost two types of America.
Dr. Fauci said that if hospitals get any more overcrowded, they're going to have to make some very tough choices about who gets an ICU bed. That choice doesn't seem so tough to me. Vaccinated person having a heart attack, yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo, rest in peace, Wheezy.
Pointing back to the unvaccinated who are really creating a problem in this country, every death that we are seeing from COVID could have been prevented.
Literally, the only people dying are the unvaccinated. And for those of you spreading misinformation, shame on you. Shame on you. I don't know how some of you sleep at night.
Protection! Every accusation is a confession.
Make sure we clarify that with people. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's effective. We know it's highly effective. Highly effective.
What I've read, they actually started the animal test, and because the animals were dying, they stopped the test.
Right.
Folks, I think that's important to understand there, that what we're talking about is the American people are now the guinea pigs. This is the test program that's going on. They didn't do the human testing, and they stopped the animal test because the animals were dying. And then they turned it out for the public. And we are now looking at businesses that want to mandate that this experimental vaccine be given to people as a condition of their employment. And yet we have this death count that continues to rise and be totally ignored.
We were told the jab could never change your DNA, but a shocking new study out of Sweden just proved otherwise. Researchers at Lund University exposed human liver cells to the Pfizer mRNA shot, and within just 6 hours, the jab's mRNA was transcribed into DNA and inserted into the genome of human cells. To put it simply, information from the shot was literally written into human DNA, the exact thing experts promised could never happen. And here's the most alarming part. Once your DNA changes, it doesn't just affect you. If these alterations happen in reproductive cells like sperm or eggs, they can actually be inherited by your children and grandchildren and permanently pass down the genetic line. And yet, if you go to the CDC's own website today, it still clearly says that these injections cannot alter your DNA in any way, even though we now have real science to prove it. Now you need to make sure everyone knows. Click that repost button, we spread this message, and people are aware of what's really going on.
The entire human genome has been poisoned with a gene that has never been in the human genome ever in history. Reverse transcriptase doesn't only cause cancer. If something is reverse transcribed and alters the DNA of a sperm or an egg, that DNA change, if that sperm or egg survives and turns into a human being, lasts forever.
The centerpiece of the Pfizer papers is an intentional attack on human sexuality, and especially on women and babies. They killed the babies and they knew it. They poisoned the breast milk and they knew it. They damaged the placentas and they knew it. They lowered the sperm count and they knew it. They have a chart of the babies they're injuring. They have a chart of the women's menstrual cycles that they're disrupting. They concluded that babies were dying in utero due to maternal exposure to the vaccine. And this is the document that went to Dr. Walensky. And then she gave a press conference saying, you've got to, get a vaccine, a COVID vaccine before, during, or after your pregnancy. What? So this is satanic.
You're goddamn right.
Right? This is satanic on a massive level. And you look at Borla and you look at, the fact that they knew they were doing this, which if you read the Pfizer papers, you cannot conclude otherwise. And this 13 to 20% drop in live births. So I guess what I'm trying to say is they tried to kill us. They tried to wipe us out. They tried to sterilize us. A lot of people died. There's going to be horrible struggles with fertility, but we survived and the truth came out.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
Independent estimates of American COVID-19 vaccine deaths, it ranges from about 470,000 from Pfizer alone up to 840,000 American deaths from the COVID-19 vaccines. We have to remember that is rivaling the American soldier death toll of World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and the Iraq War combined. So this is very serious.
The last 80 minutes of factual evidence which completely debunks the official story we were all told about 9/11, climate change, chemtrails, the origins of the COVID virus, the urgent health and safety need for masks and lockdowns, and the perfect safety and effectiveness of the COVID vaccine, proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the powers that be of this world operate in exactly the same way as Emperor Palpatine's evil galactic empire.
That's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say that.
If you strip away all the science fiction and lore, our ruling elites are functionally equivalent to the Sith Lords of Star Wars. And it's about time that we all stop living in denial of this fact. Why? Because the only reason the Empire lost in Return of the Jedi is because Star Wars is a work of fiction, and Luke Skywalker ain't coming to save us. Fuck. But at the same time, Star Wars does point to the one thing that exists in both the fictional world of a galaxy far, far away and the real world right here that we can use to defeat our very own evil empire. Who? Of Jewish supremacy. Huh? AKA Zionism.
Oh. I see.
That very real force is the mirror principle.
What the hell is even that?
So if you'd like to learn how to wield the only force that can defeat the evil of this world, click the link in the description and visit The Only Way Out is in Self-Mastery Training Dojo.